My name's Tim, I'm an addict. The time is on, I'm not going to go a moment over my allotted time. Thanks to all the organisers for putting this on. The first event I spoke at in Plymouth was in 2011. There are around 10 of us in the room. So something's happened between then and now, and the enthusiasm that there is in this room is extraordinary, and it's just a foreshadowing of what there is to come when you think of how many addicts there are in Devon and Cornwall. When you think of how many addicts there are in Devonport, there's a lot of work to do. So I'm going to be talking about step 12, but I'm going to mention some other stuff as well. When I was around 20 years clean and sober, I was in San Francisco. I'd been at a conference, a recovery conference, and an acquaintance had taken me to a meeting there and driven me back to my hotel. And in the half-hour drive, this person who was kindly driving me was shouting and complaining about all the people in his life and how everyone was doing everything wrong. They were doing everything wrong, but he was doing everything right. It was just angrier even than me. I mean, it got my attention. I'm a bad-tempered person. And later that week, I spent some time with Tom. Tom got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous in 1976, joined Al-Anon, which saves lives, in 1978. And I said to Tom, this other bloke, I couldn't believe how angry he was. He was 22 years sober and he was still that angry. Tom, who was, then 36, 37 years, said, 22 years, that's when you think you know everything. So, almost 26 years now, I know I don't know everything. I've been so rigid about so many things over the years, and you've really got to be careful what you say because you're going to eat your words so many times. My friend Anthony says, you'll end up doing everything you've ever judged in people in recovery. So I'm careful what I say now. I may change my mind. I'm meeting a friend after this from college who lives in Plymouth, and I may change my mind on the walk with her on anything I say. So if what I say is helpful to you, that's wonderful. And if it's not, don't worry about it. I'm just a bloke in recovery. That's it. So if it's helpful, feel free to use it. And the reason I'm in recovery, everyone in my family is crazy. However, only a very few of us are addicts, because substances and a few neat behavior patterns, I qualify for half a dozen fellowships, FYI. If you also qualify for half a dozen fellowships, you're in very, very good company. I digress a lot. My digressions have digressions. I've had horrible problems with sex and romance, and food has never been a straightforward topic. Lots of things will kill me, but substances allowed me to stick 2 fingers up at the world, but not die just yet. That's basically what they did for me. I was not impressed with the world. as a child. And substances gave me a trapdoor into another world where for a while everything was okay. Now, people use for different reasons. That was why I used. There's a line in the big book where it says you may pause when reading one of the 42 stories and say, yeah, that happened to me, or I felt like that, or maybe this program can work for me too. Now, it had to be pointed out to me. It says you may pause when reading one of the 42 stories. That means the other 41 stories, you're going to say, not my story, not my story, not my story, not my story. So if anything is said today, if you're new, if one person has said one thing that you connect with, the day has been a success. I have two problems with using. When I start, I don't stop. When I stop, I keep starting. It's really simple, top of page 44. And it says, you're probably an alcoholic. If that be the case, you're probably an alcoholic. Be very careful when your sponsor says probably. They mean absolutely, but they just don't want to. They don't want to fight you, so they're going to say probably. Because you can't argue with a probably, can you? So when the book says, if you drink too much, if you keep starting again, you're probably an alcoholic. What they actually mean is you're going to die. That's what they mean. And because when I start, I can't stop, and when I stop, I start again, I have a condition which is progressive and fatal and incurable. That means it's going to get worse, not better. It means if I stop for a long time, the animal is still inside me, sharpening its claws. A friend of mine slipped in 1995, took him 20 years to come back. When he came back, he still can't get it. If I slip, I may never come back, which is why my life does not belong to me. What a relief. What a relief. One of the earlier speakers talked about the three things that I can do anything about: my thinking, my attitudes, and my behavior. And my whole life, I felt responsible for everything that goes on around me. If you have an expression on your face, it's clearly my fault. If you're broken or deranged or behaving badly, it's my job to fix it. And none of this is true. Inside the hula hoop, I stand with my attitudes, my thinking, my behavior. Anything outside of that, I'm not responsible for, so the pressure is off. I can't change you, so I can relax. You may change, you may not, but it's not up to me. So the pressure is off. The only thing I can change is me, except I can't change me either. My friend Nico, who has the same sponsor as me, went to this sponsor and said very proudly, in the last 2 years in AA, I've changed such a lot. And our sponsor said, no, you haven't changed, you've been changed. So I'm not responsible for you, so I don't need to worry about that. And I can't change me, so I don't need to worry about that. I need to be concerned with one thing, which is forming a relationship with a power greater than myself that can change me. And then I don't care if you change or not. And how to form a relationship with a power greater than yourself is what this whole deal, I think, is about. The good news is you don't need to make up what you think the higher power is. Because whatever it is what it is. and it doesn't need my opinion or view or conception to exist. It's just there anyway. So I don't need to work out what the higher power is, which will save you anywhere between 2 weeks and 5 years of time you can now spend doing something more useful than working out what the higher power is. People talk about finding a higher power like the higher power is lost or over there, wherever there is. You need to find the there, you go there, then you'll find the higher power there. And neither is the case. I've been given the idea, and now I think it's true, that I've never left my higher power. I just thought I did. If you put a paper bag over your head, you won't see the sun. It doesn't mean the sun isn't there. And I had a paper bag on my head, and substances took the edge off. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, if you ask a person 100 days in a row, I really hope they would give you a different answer each day as to what a spiritual awakening is. Because I don't know everything and it looks different every single day. If you ask me today what a spiritual awakening is, it's that moment when you think, everything is actually okay the way they said it was going to be. What they said was true. And I can finally relax. And that spiritual awakening happened for me gradually throughout the steps. There were some key moments. One of the key moments was in my first step 5, which was in April 1994, where I'd summarized the catastrophe of my life on 7 or 8 pages of typed A4 on one of those old sit-up and beg typewriters. And I did that step 4. I wouldn't give you tuppence for it. Any technicians in the room would take one look at that step 4 and say, "That's not step 4." But I was following the instructions of a well-intentioned sponsor. And I read out this rubbish. And after he said, "Let's go for a pizza." And I thought, everything's all right. Just the way they said it was going to be. It's okay. My entire life problem that I've run around London trying to solve, drunk and sober and off my head in 100 different ways, can be reduced to 7 pieces of paper, which, when I read out their contents, don't produce this horror in the other person. They said, "Do you want to go for a pizza?" So the truth is okay. That's the point of step 5. And then you find a technician to get you to do it properly, but that's another conversation. The real benefit was that it's okay. We can deal with this. It's on 7 pages of A4. You can walk all the way around it and then have time for lunch. Now we know the scope of the problem. Steps 8 and 9, not the biggest deal in the world to do, terrifying. But when you admit you're wrong and say, "What can I do, if anything, to sort this out?" all the hot air goes out of it, because no one's got anything else on you. I made a little amend when I was, 12 years clean and sober. And it was one of those amends which was on the hoof. I did something wrong, and I made the amend by admitting it promptly. I was working in the City of London for a big financial firm. And my job was to do these big calculations and plug the calculations into the big whirring computer. And they said, I did loads of work, went on holiday, and I got a call when I was on holiday. And the call was from some senior person who said, the figures look wrong. The figures were the figures for this global insurance company. The figures look wrong. I said, how wrong? They said, we're expecting it to show 7 billion plus. It's showing 7 billion minus. I had made a mistake on paper. It wasn't real money, it was just figures. I was out by 14 billion pounds. I was on holiday mind, and just at the moment the true horror was revealed. The car went into a tunnel, one of those tunnels under the Alps, and I had 15 minutes to think about what I was going to say when I called them back. And I realized what had happened in the calculations. There was one figure which had been a minus instead of a plus, or a plus instead of a minus. It had fed all the way through the whole thing. So I worked out what it was. And when I called them back, I said, I got this wrong. I've made a mistake. This is the mistake. This is how I'm going to fix it. This is what we're going to do in future to make sure this mistake cannot happen again. And they weren't happy, but there was nothing left to say. I didn't defend and I didn't explain. I just admitted. And the hot air's gone out of everything. There is no hot air in my life, and I have room to breathe. So a spiritual awakening sounds fancy. What it actually means for me today, there is room for me to breathe and move around and relax and just be alive without freaking out about everything. What else does a spiritual awakening mean to me? We talk a lot in recovery about forgiveness. And the story that's occurring to me is my old, now 90-year-old mother. Now, my childhood was not... I've heard childhoods which were a lot worse in a material sense than mine. But suicidal at the age of 11 is suicidal at the age of 11. It kind of doesn't matter what happened to leave you in that state. I suspect my poor old father was an addict of sorts. Let's not go into details about what he was up to. But I suspect there was an addiction there because he was there, but he wasn't there. It was only years later I worked out why he was there, but he wasn't there. It's because he was somewhere else. That's what I'm like as an addict. I'm here, but I'm not here. I was like that with people my whole life. I could show up, I could put on a presentation, but I was never there. Then I wondered why everyone around me was so bitter. So, my father was absent, my mother was angry. Like all the time. Angry or worried, angry or worried. If you left her with her anger or her worry, she would follow you to wherever you were hiding and just remind you of all the things to be angry and worried about. My brother was an alcoholic who committed suicide and on my mother's birthday, and had written her a letter essentially blaming her for his state of mind. And that was the condition I was in when I got to recovery. I was taught by a lot of well-meaning people who were right that it was not her fault that she was the way she was. And this is true. She was brought up in France during the Second World War. Father was in a camp. Mother was beastly. I could understand intellectually why she had been the way she had been, but I couldn't let go of the past. In my heart. I could intellectually, but not in my heart. So whenever I was with her, all that would happen was the feelings from 30 years earlier were just there the whole time. And it was a block between me and her. And forgiveness was necessary. And I can tell you lots of intellectual things about forgiveness, and there are some exercises, and there are a lot of conversations behind that word, forgiveness. But essentially, God had to do for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I had to forgive her and make amends for having been absent because of my own bitterness. And this amend couldn't be done verbally. I couldn't say to her, yes, I've been behaving very well as your son for the last 15 years, treating you well, but I haven't wanted to be here for 1 minute. You can't admit that. A change needed to take place, but I couldn't bring about the change. And so I said to my higher power, you're going to have to do it. I'm going to turn up. I'm going to bring my body to the right place. It was her 80th birthday. I didn't know how I was going to forgive her. I didn't know how I was going to make amends. No one around me had a clue how this was going to work. But I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and it was her 80th birthday. We travelled down to Dorset. I live in London. We travelled down to Dorset. I knocked on the door opened, and I saw someone I'd never seen before. I'd never been angry at her. I'd been angry at the picture of her I had constructed brick by brick, brush stroke by brush stroke in my mind for the previous, whatever it was, 37, 38 years. And in that moment, because I was willing, the picture dropped and I saw the person. And I saw someone who was broken and clueless, in the same way that I've spent my life being largely broken and clueless. And I stand here today broken and clueless with an extraordinary life that I'm very comfortable and happy with, able to function effectively in every area of my life, yet inside, part of me, all of me, is broken and clueless because I'm not supposed to be fixed. Recovery is about me being a broken person, connecting with all the other broken people, and you discover you're not broken, you're a jigsaw puzzle piece. Those things you think are broken are not problems, they are not flaws, they are not faults, they're the jagged edges which enable me to connect with other people. So my job is to be really clear today that Sister B thing, without help, it was too much for us. What's your it today? And my it today, there are issues with work, there are issues in the area of sex, there are all sorts of things where I know I cannot fix it, I cannot see the path ahead. Life for me is about being dragged backwards and going forwards, in that I can only see where I've been. Life is just dragging me. I am not in charge. That's really clear. My sponsor talks about two ants on a log flowing down the river. One of them saying to the other one, "Don't you like how I'm steering this?" But the reason that I have a great life and I'm functional, I have a career, I teach other people how to practice the career that I'm in. I've been in a relationship with someone for 15 years and we're married now and we have a great time. My other half is broken and clueless in all sorts of fundamental ways, and it's just fine. We manage very well. because there is a power greater than ourselves working through both of us. That's why it works. And you don't even need to know that there is a power greater than yourself working through you for it to work through you, because it's more powerful than that. That's the amazing thing. And what I've learned is that if I stay in the heart of my home group, sitting on the front row, getting there early, leaving late, going for dinner afterwards, everything else sorts itself out, provided that I do a couple of things. Firstly, absolute reliance on God, secondary reliance on people. Can't rely on any one individual for anything. My reliance is entirely on God, which means God gets to choose who's going to speak to me today on behalf of my higher power. Could be anyone in the room. The other thing I have to do is apply the steps, the traditions, and the concepts in my life every day. Like my life depends on it, which it indeed does. The steps resolve my problem with God. My problem with God was that I thought I was God. Whenever I have an opinion about anything, I'm sitting in God's seat, not mine. Whenever I'm trying to fix you, I'm in God's seat, not mine. Whenever I'm trying to fix me, I'm in God's seat, not mine. The steps are there for me to restore my true relationship to God, which is God has the ultimate authority. I have delegated authority. Concept 6. I have to take chief initiative and active responsibility for my life, but only ever under delegated authority from God, who has absolute authority. The traditions are there to teach me how to play nicely with other people. The concepts are there to help me work with other people to get stuff done. I know people, I've got sponsees who work in very complex, dysfunctional organisations, and with my sponsees, we've never found a situation where an application of the 12 concepts of service doesn't establish clearly who's responsible for what do I do next. The answers are there, and practicing these principles in all our affairs, all of those other problems with sex and food and all of the Al-Anon stuff, I found the steps, the traditions and the concepts have solved those as well. Sometimes I've needed other fellowships, sometimes I haven't. Different people need different things. That's okay. There are some things I want to say about sponsorship in the remaining minutes. Someone asked, I always like to find out what people want to know, because I don't know which bit of my experience to bring out. Someone said, how far through step 9 does someone have to be before they start sponsoring? Things might be different down here, they might be different in America, but in London, boy, you can't wait until someone's finished the last step 9. For 2 reasons. There are too many people who need help. I needed to start helping people from day 1. Sponsorship, there's formal sponsorship and informal sponsorship. Some people have asked, if I can't find a sponsee, how do I help people? The people I sponsor most effectively, most of them won't call me, they don't think I'm their sponsor. I'm just the bloke they call on Thursday. They don't talk to their actual sponsor, but they talk to me. Half of my sponsees actually talk to someone else. I'm alive today because it was a whole team of people that bore the weight between them. So someone said, what's the responsibility of a sponsor? Dr. Bob said a wonderful thing about a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Its job is to convey an adequate picture of what alcoholism is and what the solution is. All I have to do as a sponsor is adequately present the solution, because they better not be reliant on me. They better be reliant on God and on a fellowship and on a home group and on their own service and on their own program, that they need to take responsibility for their program. I'm the dinner lady. I'm not the chef. I'm not the food. I'm just slopping out the stuff onto their little metal tray. That's all I'm doing. If they want to eat it, fine. If they don't want to eat it, fine. If they don't eat it and come back, I'm like, why do you want more? You didn't like the first batch. Maybe eat yesterday's first and then I'll serve you some more. Meanwhile, there's someone else in the queue. So you're responsible, but where does the responsibility lie? I talk to a lot of people. A lot of people I talk to come from very entangled, enmeshed families where I'm not responsible for me. I haven't got time to look after me. I haven't got time for anything in my life because you're in such trouble. I need to run around making sure that all the excuses are made and you're fixed. And I got brought up with the idea you don't take responsibility for yourself, but you do take responsibility for other people, because they can't be trusted to be responsible for themselves, but they have to fix you as well. It's completely crazy. And I've had to learn in sponsorship that I am responsible for my thoughts and feelings and actions and reactions in internal life. You, little sponsee, are responsible for your thoughts, feelings, actions, reactions, and internal life. If I say something which I believe is true and is from my experience and is said with the right intentions and with the right tone of voice, and you don't like it, I'm afraid you're going to have to process that with someone else, because you are responsible for your reaction. I'm not responsible for your reaction. I'm not responsible for whether or not you follow anything I suggest. If I suggest something and you do it, you are the one who is responsible for the decision to follow my suggestion and for the consequences. So none of the consequences can be pinned on me because I might be wrong. So I try and make that clear. The last thing you want is to give someone advice and then, 6 months later they're dead from addiction or from suicide or they leave the fellowship and think, did I push too hard? Did I say something wrong? So I've got to be I make it really clear with sponsees, what is my responsibility, what is your responsibility. If you're not sure, ask around, check it out. But you have final responsibility for the actions that you take based on my suggestions. Because I don't want anyone else's recovery on my tab. The only recovery on my tab is my recovery. And I say that from bitter experience of trying to play God in other people's lives. How do you deal with people with mental health issues was a question. How do you deal with people who have issues? Sometimes people phone up and say they're suicidal. I always point people towards outside agencies. The fellowships can't because we have no opinion, but I sure do have an opinion. I want to be covered apart from anything else and make sure that you get the help that you need. However, a lot of things in my life that turned out to be, that I thought were external problems, problems in relationships, problems with other addictions. I came into AA with no small degree of mental illness. At the heart of all of those, in my case, I don't know about anyone else's case, at the heart of all of those was I did the steps in a very piecemeal fashion for a long time. And I spent too much time when sponsoring people firefighting their problems when the real problem was not being addressed. And I can't tell you how many people I've seen who are issues. They complete the last amend, not the one before last, the last one on the list, and they can look each other, they can look me in the eye and say, there is literally no one else in the world that I have harmed, that I haven't done my utmost to make amends to. And you'd be amazed at what else disappears out of people's lives in terms of problems and issues and worries. And even if there are freakouts, the freakouts just kind of dissipate on their own. So I don't tangle with other people's disease anymore. I point them to the single solution, which is contained in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. To go through the big book, I know there are workbooks and worksheets and blah, 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 and sometimes they help and sometimes they don't. But you know what I'm doing at the moment? I had a bad patch recently. I mean, what does bad patch mean? Nothing compared to... I wouldn't go back to being 24 years sober. But within my 26th year, there have been some things I found difficult. And you know what I ended up doing? With a bunch of people who've completed the first 9 steps, I've said, how about we start at page... And these are people sober or clean for 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. And I said, how about we start at the first line of step 10 on page 84, and we go through 10 minutes a day. Just read a couple of lines. What do you think? What do I think? You tell a story, I tell a story. All I needed to do was to start doing that very basic work with a bunch of people who are sober and clean for a long time. And I stopped waking up in the morning with this weight of burden upon me. I didn't know where the weight of burden came from. What I've learnt today is when I'm fulfilling my primary purpose, which is to maximize my availability to God, to work through me, to help other people, everything else is as light as a feather, and my life is full of responsibilities, let me tell you. But they're as light as a feather if I keep the main thing the main thing. The answer in my case, I know this is a terrible thing to say, it shouldn't be true, but the answer is always more 12-step work. And I was talking to a friend of mine in recovery the other day about wondering what the problem is. Maybe I'm not working with enough other people. And he laughed because I work with a lot of people. I get a lot of calls every day. I get a lot of calls every week. I do a lot of service in my fellowship. I'm on a national subcommittee. I'm a conference delegate. I have 2 home groups. I go to the region meetings. I'm involved up to my neck in recovery. But sometimes the thing that I'm missing is what it says on page 89 about intensive work with another alcoholic. It may need to be extensive as well. I may need to be filling a lot of time with it, but it's that intensive work. And I'll finish on one point. Every problem I've ever had sober ultimately boils down to my addiction in some kind of new form, with me trying to manage it for years on my own. And I was talking to a sponsee, sober for donkey's years this morning, who's going through the book from the beginning. We're just talking through a few lines every day. We don't care how long it's going to take. And we talked about hopelessness. And hopelessness is where it's at. Hopelessness is when I realize I cannot solve the problem I created with the mind that created the problem in the first place. That's hopelessness. It's not all of the external manifestations. It's the internal realization. I'm just a dummy on a planet with 7 billion other dummies, on which amazing things can happen if you're smart enough to realize you're too much of a dummy to solve your own problems. And that's why I need a home group. That's why I need a fellowship, to go and just dissolve into this mass of people and stop taking myself so goddamn seriously. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Tim.